I'm still on X, formerly known as Twitter, but not as much as I used to be. And one of the reasons I keep checking back is an account named Lauren from Facebook. If you are on X, she is the one to follow for a lot of good information. And there are a couple others, but these days there are not that many. And so she has just put together another video. And it's about Chris Proudfoot, specifically. Chris and Katie Proudfoot. And for me, it's very important that, let's hear what the video contains.
That night?
Not only that, but for him to go out the window, so to speak, he would have landed in the flower bed and, barefooted.
So in this particular case, now he's talking about all the possibilities regarding what could have potentially happened in Sebastian's case. And even though he dismisses many of them, I still think that the reason he brings up all these possibilities is because he wants people to think about them and consider them and spend time talking about anything other than what actually did happen. So listen to him right now.
Yeah, we'd have heard something because he had landed on it and screamed.
Yeah.
We would have heard something because he would have landed on the screen. Really? Who would have heard it? You mean when you were on... Well, let's go on. Let's go back to this.
Yeah, but what I can say is there's only two doors in the house that he could have gone out, and the one he wouldn't have gone out because of how much noise it makes.
Yeah.
Everybody would have, plus it would have been seen on.
And listen to how he stumbles, how relaxed he is. And he is elaborating on, there was two doors, got it. And there was a window, okay, got it. Was the window open? Well, here's the thing. When there's an obvious explanation, that Darewood fabrication, for example, in the case of Jack and Lily Sullivan, when they know it's becoming more and more obvious what actually took place, they want you to think about anything. And they will talk about anything because there is a real significance to how much time you spend on what. It is a percentage game within statements. So when there is too much talk about things that actually didn't happen, there is a reason for it. Because they want to remove your attention away from the logical train of thought. So they want somebody to go, yeah, but what if, but what if, but what if? And it simply didn't happen. So skip over it. If you didn't think it makes sense, then don't spend time on it. Spend time on the possibilities and then let your thoughts wander into the right direction and explore it with others. Think about what could be the case. And again, in his interviews, he goes so much out on tangents. And I listened to a few things just recently. For the first year, I didn't listen to any of it. But then I realized just how beneficial it was to Chris Proudfoot actually that people talk about anything but what really happened that night, what makes the most sense. Even when people talk about the CPS reports, even when people talk about, when he goes out there and talks about, beating Sebastian, and I think a lot of people gotten too focused on him, and he feels comfortable drawing the focus on him and himself because A, he likes it, and B, he doesn't have the fear of somebody who committed a murder. It wasn't him. He is covering up for his wife. He feels very confident, comfortable. He almost feels like he's a lawyer now. He's somebody or a PR person. And it makes him feel like a big man, especially in front of Katie. I think that while Katie Proudfoot is far more intelligent than him, he wants to feel needed, and he loves to be in this particular position because he always tries to make himself bigger than he is. And suddenly he has become the central figure in a case where he hasn't been the one who was alone with Sebastian that night. So it's easy for him to go out there and turn his appearances into some sort of a manifesto. But again, I think that we need to really stick with what we know, what his language actually indicates.
Camera. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
I mean that.
So he's laughing. They would have been on camera, and this is a huge joke for him because duping delight shows up in different ways, and we have seen it in Katie. But in his particular case, he is not as subtle, and there are many occasions where he starts to laugh when he feels that he gotten one over you, because the camera footage or lack thereof is what this is all about. Sebastian was not caught on camera for obvious reasons, but he is now trying to make it sound like there is a reason why Sebastian wouldn't be on camera. And the more we learn now about the electronics and so on, the more I realize just how packed and crammed with deception all of the early statements were. And very well designed, and I believe that all came from Katie Proudfoot, but he had the ability to take over at times. So when Katie Proudfoot talked about we combed through his electronics, he brought up law enforcement, not saying that they examined it, which they hadn't at the time, but they were extremely focused, both Chris and Katie Proudfoot. While much of what they said seemed sort of like a shock and surprise and something, that out of the blue to many of you, they had put a lot of effort into this. And they put on a show, and Chris Proudfoot especially. So keeping people talking about anything that leads away from what actually happened is key to him. Because the moment that you get close, he will shout you down.
It would have been seen on camera.
He can answer questions, yes.
As soon as you start talking about Sunday.
Yeah. Okay. So
I don't say nothing. Saturday.
Well, here's the thing, though. In several interviews, he took over and talked about what happened this Sunday, but he obviously wasn't there. And they have camera footage from BJ's, and they have camera footage during the day, and Katie was with his sisters, right? So he wasn't there. But as I've said before, I think he wanted Katie to meet with his sisters, because through them, he gotten some information about what's going on in the house, and there's a possibility he wasn't allowed around Sebastian, or maybe he removed himself because he figured I cannot resist the temptation to abuse him. Let's put it that way. Either he was ordered to stay away from Sebastian, or CPS started putting so many restrictions on him and demands on him, because with all of the reports and all of the visits, things were not getting any better. And Sebastian became more and more verbal. He more and more realized that while he didn't have help from Seth, and he didn't tell Seth what really happened at home, how it was, and he didn't have, obviously, help from Katie, and he was surrounded by people who were his enemies. The Bauer Soxes and Chris Proudfoot's family, they were on Chris's side. And we don't know how he talked to them about Sebastian, but I can imagine when he said, take your little retard in the house. That's what was overheard by a neighbor. I am pretty sure that the way he and some of his family members talked about Sebastian was just extremely nasty. I think that is something that comes through very obviously when, even though he is a missing child right now, still they don't let go. Katie neither, but especially Chris, who trashes him, who, talking about a legacy, when talking about destroying somebody's legacy, and talking about the incidents in school, and everything is just negative, everything is weird and awkward, you know what I mean? He's trying to paint this picture of Sebastian that he thinks we should have, and the picture that he himself had. And again, I think he is baffled that this case took on a life of its own, because simply speaking, he was a nuisance to him. He was somebody that you just want to get rid of, somebody who shouldn't even be there. Just get him out of there. I don't care how. You know what I mean? So he is also thinking none of you know anything. Because if you had known Sebastian, you would not like him. And remember the allegations that he made towards Seth, allegedly, right? About why he wouldn't let Nina or Faith, right? Faith, his daughter, around Sebastian. And nobody would be searching for Sebastian if they knew what he supposedly did. I would love to have a direct statement from him making these allegations, by the way. I would be able to tell immediately what is and isn't to that. It's easy to put things out in the ether and then sort of have people's wheels turning and the seeds planted. But that's all. I mean, forget most of what you heard and start over and go to the very beginning and let him tell us what actually took place. And he is telling us that. In this particular case, he's talking about what didn't happen. But when you spend so much time about what didn't happen, that's a red flag in itself. Because you should talk about what happened. You shouldn't say, I searched everywhere. You should think about where you haven't looked. And every single possibility should be racing through your mind, that you don't have time to even talk about where he isn't. Explore any remote possibility as to where he might be. Even though Belinda, Jack and Lily's grandmother, doesn't believe the story about the hiding that the kids were hidden, she still reached out to the chief, right, of the reservation. And from what I understand, the chief got really upset about her even considering such a possibility. And so there was a negative emailing back and forth. But he should understand, you're talking about the grandmother who doesn't know what happened to the children, who is desperate, reaching out and, I don't know exactly what the beginning of the conversation was. And if it sounded like she was accusing him of something or not. But she has explained, in my opinion, that she just wanted to make sure that even though she doesn't believe in that theory that's put out there, she would still like to have some confirmation that there isn't anything to it. Because you cannot help it if you don't know where your children are. any possibility. You won't be able to rest until somebody actually tells you, or an area is absolutely cleared, where you know, okay, this didn't happen. I need to step back from this possibility. You wouldn't go into these tangents and talk about what you say didn't happen for many, many hours all over the different lives where he went. So the fact that he's talking about, I don't say nothing about Sunday or Saturday. Okay, first of all, Saturday was the day before. Sebastian was reported missing on that Monday morning, February 26th, right, of last year. So he talked extensively about that Sunday. So why is he now telling us that he cannot say anything about Sunday?
I don't say nothing. But anything after that, from the 6th, from midnight to 6?
From midnight to 6. Now remember, Katie Proudfoot claimed midnight she went to sleep, obviously. And she woke up at 6. And he was supposedly in Memphis. How would he know? And more than anything, why would this timeline, midnight to 6, be so important? What would he know about that? Because this is a time frame where it actually all takes place. And he needs to take the opportunity to explain away certain things. This is where he needs you to not look at. Remember the interview with the PI or the phone call with the PI. He kept talking about, he wants to know what Seth knows and then fill in the blanks. And you're going to see the call to narc divers later on as well while they were searching. He wants to be right there. He wants to be right there when law enforcement and volunteers are brainstorming, because he wants to inject his false theories to confuse them. He wants to bring in his narrative immediately and not let them have a chance to sit together and conclude what makes sense logically. Creating confusion is at the forefront here. And what he is threatened by is the truth. And you getting closer to the truth. That's why he always wants to be right there. That's why he replies to people who are getting close to the truth. He doesn't want people to sit there and read it, think about it, and say, oh my God, this makes too much sense. He wants you not to look at it. And this is why he's talking about from midnight to 6, because he wants to be the one. He's putting himself into the position of an authority in terms of speaking about that particular time frame. Because the last thing he wants you to do is to be able to make up your own mind and get to what is logical, get to what makes sense. This is why he is there. This is why he spends so much time on these lives, because he wants to control the narrative. And more than anything, every time somebody gets close, he will shout you down and tell you this is absolutely ridiculous. These are rumors. These are speculations. So there's this gaslighting process of basically telling you, no, you just read stuff online. You are just gullible. You are being misled. This is just a rumor, right? Rather than a claim. Dismissing a claim as a rumor and dismissing a valid thought as a baseless opinion is what they do when they cannot tell you that you're wrong. The only thing that they can do is try to get you to doubt your own thoughts, or try to overshadow them with allegations that you are just somebody who's sitting in front of the computer mindlessly absorbing whatever some people make up. That's why he always gets to the specific parts that are not important where somebody makes some sort of a mistake, because his messages don't think. Let me tell you exactly what happened. Let me make it crystal clear.
Okay.
Being on the phone with her prior to?
Prior to, right? Midnight. Okay, prior to midnight. He was on the phone with her. What, 9:46 to 12? There was also this claim about the 3-hour call. It wouldn't be 3 hours then, right? It would be long, but not 3 hours. But Katie said it's normal for them to talk that long. So if you talk for 3 hours, why wouldn't you drive down there? If you miss each other so much, why wouldn't you do a 3-hour drive from Memphis over the weekend and stay with your wife? Yeah, we still don't know a lot of things. Was he ordered to stay away from Sebastian? Not ordered away from his house, obviously, but Sebastian. That's possible.
Yeah, I can answer those questions.
How can you answer these questions if Katie was asleep and you were not there? Yeah. Because let's go first to the retention part. So I've looked at it again and again, and I cannot conclude that a scent was actually picked up. I don't have proof of that yet. I don't have any proof of it. There was something in the pond, and I do believe it could have been the sleeping pills that Sebastian was over medicated with. Because what do people like to get rid of immediately? Katie said he is already, and moves her hand to her throat. I believe that indicates a time, a moment when she realized Sebastian was no longer alive. What do people get rid of? They get rid of the murder weapon. So if these were Sebastian's sleeping pills, and she gave him far too many, she wouldn't want the bottle to be found. It's somebody to have the opportunity to look at the prescription, date of purchase, and say, hold on, there are far too many missing here. So I believe there's a big possibility, and I've said it before when he talked, everything is still on the table, that she wanted Sebastian to sleep, and something happened on the table. The pills were on there, the sleep aid was on there, and I do believe he couldn't go to sleep, and she wanted to make sure he goes to sleep because she wanted to have alone time talking with Chris on the phone without Sebastian being heard in the back. So I believe that she gotten to the point where she just gave him so much that he tried to vomit. He tossed and turned, fell out of bed, and hit his face on the floor, which is what he eventually passed away from. This is only my opinion. Everybody's innocent until proven guilty. But that is also why she talks about how overstimulated he gets and how much he had to eat that day. And I want to say one more thing. People have talked about premeditation that I am not convinced of, by the way. Yes, a lot of things may... okay, let me say it like this. The disappearance of Sebastian was very convenient for both Chris and Katie. Extremely convenient. But I need the language to indicate it to me. Even though people say it would make sense, it was on the anniversary of Katie's divorce, and it was with all the CPS reports. I know all of that. But I believe there are fine lines between actually premeditating something. And by the way, all of this green hoodie stuff, get rid of this stuff. I mean, if your thoughts go there, he did come home that night. And it happened in his house, what happened. So if your thoughts are so out there, then of course you're going to assume there was a premeditation. There was a high level of premeditation planned by the whole family. But I think actually that at the time, Katie Proudfoot was so sick of him, and she just gave him too much, knowing the risk, only wanting her husband back, and looking at Sebastian no longer as her child, but just a burden, just a total burden. So yes, maybe what I'm saying. Okay, I'm not going to explain it, but I am not stuck on the premeditation thing. I believe that she acted out of hatred, and that hatred built over time, and it escalated because now more and more she missed Chris Proudfoot. She hadn't been away from him for that long, I think ever since they first gotten married, right? And she gotten to the point where you can see it also at the Texas Roadhouse, where she is intensely on the phone, and her son is not even there. He's not in her mind. Her mind is not even. There's only one moment where maybe he reached for some bread or something like that, and she signaled him no, because she wanted to make sure he went to sleep. If it was premeditated, what would you care if he has another piece of bread? But she didn't want it because she wanted to. She told us already that when he has too much sweets or too much food in general, in her opinion, he gets overstimulated. And Chris Proudfoot told us Sebastian never slept well. He always had problems sleeping. But if you talk to him about that particular night, he cannot talk about that particular night. Of course, he had no problem sleeping, but he always had problems sleeping. Unless he had a rough day of playing, a hard day of playing, right? But he didn't have that hard day. He was eating a lot. He couldn't even go bowling. And he hung out with a bunch of little girls, with Chris's nieces, right? I mean, how exciting is that for a 15-year-old to spend his Sunday? So this retention pond, the dog jumped right in there. And when Chris talked about equally dissolved, he used that terminology. I believe that they took something off Sebastian's there, likely that bottle of sleeping pills, and dumped it in there, dumped the pills in there. I believe that's exactly what happened. And what I also believe is that, I believe that's what the dog hit on, when the dog jumped straight in there, because these pills have not been dissolved yet. And something that Sebastian was in contact with was in there. Of course, Chris wanted to use this to try to make us believe that the dog followed Sebastian's scent. That was essential to him. Because anything other than that would indicate Sebastian didn't walk away, which he didn't. Similar with Jack and Lily Sullivan. The dogs didn't follow any scent into the forest. These kids didn't walk into the forest. He's trying to discredit the dogs later on. They're only right 25% of the time. Why? Because the dogs didn't act in his favor. The dogs should have followed a scent for quite some time, where Sebastian would have walked.
And the retention pond at the time was no deeper than my knee, so we're talking less than 3 feet deep.
How high is your knee? I know it's a lot less than 3 feet, right? Let me think. I'm not going to stand up. Well, his math is not really, he's not that math oriented. But, if you're 6 foot tall, up to the knee wouldn't be half of your height, right? I mean, let's keep it this simple. But anyways, Chris, not an issue. Why is it that important for him to point out how low it was? And even though his math is off, the fact that he says less than that indicates the intention behind his statement, right? He doesn't say about 2 to 3 feet. He doesn't say maybe 2 feet, or he doesn't say that either. The point is that it is less than 3 feet. And remember when he talked also about concrete, how to bury a body in concrete, how thick it would have to be, and so on and so such. So there has been speculations that maybe he threw Sebastian's body in there and decided against it because I don't think so. I mean, I don't see that indication yet. It wouldn't make sense. But what is possible is for him, for this to run through his mind as a reason why this is not the place to get rid of Sebastian, because it's only 3 feet deep. The same way, it wouldn't make sense for him to try to bury him in the concrete of a driveway. His mind is going there, and his mind had gone there previously. How to get rid of a body. His comment, don't mess with a blue-colored man because we have access to acid. These types of thoughts have been present in his mind before. How to get rid of a dead body? What would you do? So it is not a surprise that to this day we haven't found Sebastian, because these are certain areas he has already mentally explored. And of course, I would love to see his Google searches, but I don't think that this is something he would look up in Google. I don't think he is that much of a searcher, to be honest with you. I think he is more of a talker and probably had a lot of conversations with people. You know, I mean, we heard his alleged boss that the PI had. And, you know, in my opinion, it was one of his friends, but you hear how he talks. So you can assume that you can assume a lot of things. Anyways, and some of you have suggested that that was the, well, now let me not get into this, into the personal dealings between people right now, because how do I bring this up without making it, let me think. Well, there were claims of entanglements that, yeah, you know, let me get to this later, or let me not get to this at all, because I already spoke about how I think that, you know, there was no due diligence done, in my opinion. That she probably called a coworker or a friend of Chris's, and maybe the number was given to her by Chris. Oh, this dude, he's my boss. His name is Jeff. Oh, don't worry about it. Just call him. He's going to tell you everything. And those of us who heard the conversation, yeah, I already went through this, right? I don't need to go through it again. But here's the thing. He probably has a lot of conversations with a lot of people because he's a talker. And I think he likes to talk more than he likes to listen. So, however, he does learn things here and there, and he loves to talk about what he knows. So, talking about this only being 3 feet deep would indicate that, yeah, he thought about at one point, this is not a place to dump a body. It's going to wash up, and the boy is already no longer with us, and there will be no water in the lungs, and it would be great to have this story out there, right? About autistic boy wanders off and drowns, what? In a lake, in a pond that's less than 3 feet deep? Not logical. And with the meds allegedly in his system, his mind goes there. The depth in my opinion, of this pond was extremely important to him, at least at one point. Did he go there? Did he drive very slowly with Sebastian in the car? Is that why? It's possible. You see, dogs don't follow a car that's speeding off with a dead body in it, or with a body, period. Whose scent they follow. But what if you drive really slowly? And he talks about it again and again. And this is something that's, by the way, very crucial to me. When he talked narc divers doing the searches, he didn't want them to do the search on their own without him interjecting, because he didn't want them to freely draw their very own conclusions. He wanted to be the one giving them. By the way, I used to live in an area that looked just like that, close to Atlanta. Wow. Same style. So he is afraid of people drawing their own logical conclusions. And he comes right in there and tries to explain things away and lead you away. And it was killing him not to know what Seth knew. That same PI he talked to. It was killing him not to know that. Because he said he wants to fill in the blanks. And what that means is, when you are stuck at a point where you have information and you're starting to form a picture in your mind of what actually took place and what makes the most sense, that is, from his perspective, the very dangerous position for him to be in, being on the outskirts of that and having people come together, especially online. And you know how it happens when somebody draws the right conclusion or new information comes out, and little by little people say, oh, wow, they read it, they will read it again, then they comment, then they read the comments, then they realize they're not the only ones concluding what is accurate. And that is the sad part of human nature, in my opinion, that when people see enough others paying attention to something, they do as well, meaning it also can happen that they pay attention to the wrong thing. When somebody is as vocal as Chris Proudfoot and as determined to tell you what happened, fill in the blanks, so to speak. And he understands that. Chris Proudfoot is a master. I can't believe I'm saying this. A master at recognizing people's weaknesses. We have seen that in certain interviews with people whose names shouldn't even be known, right? Which is why I'm not going to rehash the names. But many of you know who I'm referring to. He knows how to detect weaknesses. He knows how to become sort of your fortress, as he is doing right now in the case of Katie Proudfoot. I think he enjoys it when she is getting very lost and very stuck, and he can be the big man taking over, even though he's much less intelligent than her. He suddenly is the guy who says, let me handle this, baby. This is what I'm here for. Feeling needed is a position he loves to be in. And right here, before they have time to even analyze and examine exactly what they are discovering right now, he called in to give that theory that Sebastian walked off the porch. And the porch is a highly sensitive area because he mentioned this again and again and again. And I believe something happened at the porch, so where he may have passed away, actually, potentially. I've talked about this in my previous videos. The specific statements that lead me to consider this as a very strong possibility. And then he was transported away. But here, he is calling them. And by the way, narc divers, not that long ago, made a video called I believe the title was Sebastian Didn't Walk Out of That House, or Didn't Walk Away from Home, or Sebastian Didn't Walk Away, something like that. So obviously they who were there later on, once the dust settled, they realized, wait a minute, all of this garbage that we have been made to be a part of, the answer is really obvious. So when people talk about the dog followed the scent and no, I need to see proof of that. I'm not buying into that. Maybe they followed a scent, but not Sebastian walking away, not him walking off. In a minute, you're going to hear just how important that aspect is to him. So yes, the narc diver guys probably, they try to put the pieces together. They listen to him. He's really good one-on-one talking to people, and sort of he knows how good he is at that. That's why he always says, I would love to have this conversation in person, because he thinks he's a very charming guy who knows how to get you to abandon your own thoughts. And he recognizes people's weaknesses. He probably invites you over, makes you a drink, has some funny stories to tell, whatever. And people tend to forget that we are dealing with a person of interest here. So this video, I believe, is still out there. I have already featured it in a previous reaction setting with my analysis of it. The original one has been removed. I couldn't even see the video I had just mentioned on Narc Divers when I just searched for it. So I guess they moved it to a member section. Or for whatever reason, they may have removed it. But a lot of things get removed, but there is part of it still available that I may again revisit at a later time. But right now, I'm focused on this one. And I'm much more comfortable doing that. And Lauren, again, has done it again in terms of putting together something that is full of areas worth examining that have been ignored previously. But remember this part. How deep was the pond again? Yeah. Okay, leave me a comment. How high is your knee? How tall are you? How high is your knee? I mean, well, he's stuck on the 3 foot because he wants to be able to say less than, because that's what's on his mind. Here we go.
She's only knee deep. Palm was only knee deep. On. There's no higher than knee.
And he is not a very good proficient speaker, other than maybe his buddies like the Jeff guy who we heard, who was, I mean, his language, you heard his language. He's not that comfortable being elaborate on, he uses the same terminology again and again and again and again and again. I think his vocabulary is low, and so we see a lot of repetition here. Many people recall Chris saying he was heading back to Memphis Sunday. I don't know about that, but let's hear it. Well, when we talk about recollections from people who have witnessed a pre-interview with, what's her name? Duchess, right? The first interview they had ever given. And some of you said they heard it. I haven't heard it. But I'm going by the reliable people when more than one told me something very similar and tell me in a reliable manner that they heard something specifically. And in these cases, when somebody tells you, of course it's hearsay, right? But you can tell if people exaggerate or if people want to use the topic to get too much of a platform and talk too much about, make it sound bigger than it is, or if they're actually being factual and really are convinced that what they're saying is what happened without making it any bigger. So what you want to be careful with is when people, for example, that woman who claims to have seen Sebastian, There are people who always want to use something, make it bigger than it is as a way to get attention. But I'm pretty good, obviously. I'm very, let me say it like this. It is second nature for me to detect intentions. So when somebody starts exaggerating, I often do the reset, meaning I either talk about something else and then I go back to it and see if I can get them to restart by only letting me know what they actually know. But let's hear. In a recorded call posted to Facebook before their first interview ever aired. Yes, and that would be the pre-interview, right?
And I said, you said that you would answer all questions, and I watched the interviews and all the others that you and Katie have done, and I said, I'm confused because in one interview, I think
it said
you were home on the 25th of February and left and went back to Memphis.
Well, yeah, this is a problem for me right now because I want to have the exact wording from Chris Proudfoot rather than a recollection. And it's really strange to me. Of course, I would have, recorded it had I seen it, right? But I didn't. So if you actually heard the pre-interview and you remember anything very specifically, please leave me a comment or email me and let me know without any type of conclusion of your own. Just let me know what you remember for sure has been said. Then I would love to revisit this, and I will revisit this. But at this point in time, as a statement analyst, I cannot go by what people remember of something. And I'm saying that also because I have realized a lot of people who don't have the intention to mislead have had inaccurate recollections. And sometimes you have different people who heard the same thing and they argue about what was actually being heard. Similar to, hey, can you describe a car accident? People rarely agree on something. And if they agree, then there's something to that. That means a script is being introduced. What the script being what was actually said. And in a case where Daniel and Malaya say almost the same thing, the script would be what they have talked about before. So I am not going to spend too much attention to
this. Is this correct? And he said, no, I got home the 26th, the day that Sebastian was missing.
I got home the 26th, the day that Sebastian was missing. Okay.
Around 1 p.m.
Deceptive said that he traveled Sunday. Where did he travel? See, this is possible. This is possible, but I want to hear it myself, people. Does any of you actually have a recording? Wow, if you do, you know how to reach me. Stepdad said on the podcast that he travels Sunday evening. Well, yeah, let me not get into this, but I am still curious as to, in these 3 weeks that he had been home, did he visit any family? Or did he just stay up there? Did he have a relationship with somebody? What did he do? Yeah, these things are important in terms of, clarifying a little bit here and there, right? I will let this stand here on its own without me getting into it right now. Chris told creators behind the scenes that his truck was caught on geofencing. I believe at one point it did. In that night. I do believe that. And I'll tell you in a minute just why.
Supposedly on the night that Sebastian disappeared, they go through and they check like all the Wi-Fi in the area, and there was only 2 Wi-Fis that came in that area and left that area, like 2 open networks, 2 traveling.
Which was the other one? Cassie Bauer sucks?
Wi-Fis came in and left.
Okay.
And apparently Chris claims one was his truck.
Yeah. Chris saw what Sebastian wore to bed, and this is an area that I've already gotten into, and I will keep it very short and sweet. Let's hear it.
Y'all don't think maybe he might have put a sweater on or something?
Okay, so the discussion was from the very beginning, why can't anybody give us the true description of what Sebastian was wearing? Same problem with Jack and Lily, right? And I believe that is because it happened around bedtime. It happened to Jack and Lily around bedtime, and it happened to Sebastian around bedtime. So if you remove a body and that person wearing what they wore or usually wore when they went to bed, then you talking about what they really had on may indicate too obviously that the idea of that person or these persons or these children walking away from home when it was cold out in whatever they had on when they went to sleep, not their regular street gear, it would be a dead giveaway that your timeline is off and your story is off.
That right there that would be an assumption, and we never.
That would be an assumption. I missed that part, by the way. I put a sweater on or something. I mean, might have. I mean, wouldn't you? How many clothing items do your children have? If, God forbid, your children went missing, and you go into their closet and figure out what they put on themselves, how long would it take for you as a mother to know exactly what they were wearing? I would have a problem telling you what exactly I'm trying to think what my daughter wore today. I know. Yeah, I know what you wore. But it took me a minute. And I don't pay attention to that at all. And I believe, of course, women have more of a very natural ability and recollection and would be able to say, oh, no, it was this light blue dress and there were 2 pink flowers on the side and there was like a yellow butterfly on the other side and there were, you know what I mean? More detail oriented. So I believe there's avoidance here. They don't want to tell us what he had on. And I realize Chris's speech patterns when he wants to avoid something. And that is simply because I have spent a year going through a lot of his interviews. I know when he laughs. I know when he gets angry. I know what triggers him. And that becomes clear after a while, where you don't have to think about it anymore. You just recognize, okay, there we go. This is avoidance right here, telling us what Sebastian wore.
On or something?
I mean,
that right there
it would be an assumption. So he's being dismissive. He's not saying, no, it didn't happen. He's not doing that directly. But he wants to be dismissive about it. And yeah, it's a form of, I hate the term gaslighting. I hate overusing it. But he loves to tell people, yeah, this is a rumor. This is just gossip. This is basically he's questioning your intent, people's intentions when they speak the truth. He is attacking the messenger rather than replying to the message.
That would be an assumption, and we never saw him.
We never saw him.
We saw what he went to bed in.
We saw what he went to bed in, and this is very crucial. And I believe that at around 3 a.m., the time when we saw those lights, he saw what Sebastian was wearing. And what he was wearing was what he went to bed in. And that was it.
And that was it.
This is another good one.
Last time I saw Sebastian was early February.
Last time I saw Sebastian was early February.
Until I came home February 26th.
Until I came home February 26th. Now, again, it's easy to get desensitized with all of the things he says that make no sense, but everything he says actually does make sense when you dissect it properly. Don't go past it, but examine it. Analyze his statements. What is he saying to us? Early February, he had left and he hadn't returned home. But February 26th, when he came home, until then he hadn't seen Sebastian, but that was when he saw him. And that aligns perfectly with him seeing what Sebastian wore to bed. And he didn't see him going to bed, in my opinion, but he saw what he had on when Sebastian was allegedly transported away, in my opinion. We saw what he went to bed in. Absolutely. And that's the early morning hours of February 26th.
That's all I can tell you.
And that's all I can tell you, okay? So, I don't want to get further into it because now, if I say more, I'm going to give away too much of myself. And now this part here, I had to listen to twice. And also I encourage all of you, if there's something that stands out to you, listen to it again. Listen a second, a third, whatever, how many times until things become clearer. Don't skip over anything that stands out to you. Now, this is going to be about Tony Mattis, what he, well, let's hear it. The lack of the scent trail. Again, don't assume there was a scent trail because this is a very sensitive area. He wants you to believe that the dog picked up a scent. And remember when he talked about there were 3 dogs and this dog, this and this, and it was just very unorganized speech, which is often performed because the facts, the simple facts, cannot stand on their own. The simple facts do not align with the narrative or the message that you're trying to get the public to believe. Listen to this.
The people that say, like, well, how did he leave, but there was no scent? Well, how do you know there was no scent?
Well,
again,
so you know where that source came from.
So, the question is about how could Sebastian leave if there was no scent, right? Oh, this is Granny's watching. Yeah. Remember my videos about her? I was going to do part 3 and then I just burned out. So I appreciate Lauren for putting this together so I don't have to suffer through it to get to the highlights. And this is one of them. So again, the message is being ignored. The messenger is being focused on. And we don't care about Tony Mattis or anybody else, what says or thinks, unless he comes to us with the claim about Kathy Bauer sucks. But we want to know more about the source, and we need to stick with it and not allow ourselves to be shouted down. as I believe Seth did. And he is successful shouting Seth down, and has been. And I wish that Seth would revisit these early questions, but he hasn't done that. Because I believe, just because Chris said it's a rumor, Seth, no. When you're dismissive, that indicates to me that there's much more here. But I have spoken about this and will probably do so more in the future. So in this particular case, he is now going to talk about Tony Mattis. And he's going to talk about him Chris Proudfoot style. What does Chris do when he's outsmarted? When he has nothing to say? When he is cornered by facts? He becomes threatening. He shouts people down. And he doesn't have a direct line maybe to Tony in terms of, well, this is now public, right? And he feels the need to address this, rather than telling us exactly what the dogs did and why the area of lack of scent needs to be spoken about factually, without interpretations, without anybody trying to tell you Sebastian's still alive and this and that. We want to know only what we can prove factually speaking.
Right?
I would say Crustin over there.
Well, actually, the person that said it on an interview was douchebag TikTok Tony.
TikTok Tony. Of course, whatever you think about Tony, he is being, the fact that he's being dismissive right now. Basically, he's just another TikToker who's making stuff up, right?
Or Tony Mathis, what do you want to call the guy? He's the one that said it during his little escalade and bullshitting of trying to paint a picture that Katie and I are guilty.
That Katie and I are guilty and all this. Mind you, he didn't say the picture that Katie and I were guilty, or are supposedly guilty, or trying to picture of us being guilty. There's an embedded sentence I cannot get past. Katie and I are guilty. But here's the problem. If there was no scent that the dog followed of Sebastian's, why would that make you guilty if you were supposedly not home? Because you are, in my opinion. But what exactly are you guilty of? Murdering Sebastian? No. The transport area, the transport part, the cover-up. Allegedly, in my opinion. Based on what I have spoken about many, many times. And all this. Katie and I are guilty and all this. What is all this? Right? There's a lot more here that he doesn't want to address because he is not interested in you paying attention to the important area. So he's trying to be dismissive and say all this not worth mentioning. No, it is very worth mentioning. And listen, this is just such a small part of the whole interview. He loves to talk about what didn't happen. But what actually did happen, that's what we need to focus on, people. And this he touches up on really quickly, dismisses it, and expects you to do the same thing.
All this shit. And yes, I will bash the shit.
And yes, of course, when he's cussing up a storm also. In the past, I'm not going to rehash what I've spoken about in my previous videos. You can watch them if you like. The moment he starts cussing up a storm, bash the shit out of him, uses language that is normally, when Seth said somebody saw Cassie Bowersox in the early morning hours at Worshams close to the house of Sebastian's, that is a prime example. When he freaks out and he doesn't even deny reliably that she was there. He doesn't say, no, my mother wasn't there. He goes out into the world of discrediting, threatening, and so on. But the language stands on its own. He doesn't get into the message. Was there a scent or wasn't? He called the narc divers because he wants them to immediately assume there was a scent that was followed. A scent of Sebastian's walking away, which he did not. In my opinion, at all. Yeah, Chris, you will bash the shit out of him. That's a great discussion, right? I don't want you to bash the shit out of him. I want you to tell me that the message is inaccurate, no matter who said it. Then you can introduce whatever you like, eventually, and maybe get to the person who's lying about you, supposedly, right? But first you need to tell me that it's a lie and what the truth is, and that what this person has said is not the truth. And by the way, this didn't just come from Tony.
Shit out of Tony.
I beat the shit out of you. What? Yeah? Oh, really? Yeah, that's Chris's style, man. That's why he likes to be one-on-one, because he can be more intimidating one-on-one. And he has probably a hard time looking at the screen, thinking about this, not being able to have a physical confrontation. Maybe he has a couple of drinks here and just like gets really mad, and then Katie says, sweetheart, oh, don't be so upset. Here's another drink. And, many times you can hear the glass. Thank you. Where she probably handed him a drink, or he handed her a drink. And it's tough for him to have a simple conversation. It's very hard for him to argue. He is not intelligent enough to have a proper discussion and win a proper discussion without intimidation. And I also want to talk about this whole area of narcissism. I believe narcissism is a behavior more so than sociopathy being an uncurable condition. Could be curable, we just don't know yet how it can be cured, but there is a deep-seated insecurity, actually. And I believe that probably at one point when he was a child in kindergarten, he knew that he wasn't as quick as the other kids, as most of them. So I think his self-image, the way he portrays himself, there is a deep-seated need for him to say, I have a brain too. I believe that he probably was able to beat up other kids as needed, in quotation marks, as needed, which is a pattern he developed very early on. But I also believe that he probably saw children that were weaker than him and a lot smarter than him. And he always had this inner void, kind of, we want what we don't have, what we cannot have, what we think we cannot have. So he knows his own limits deep inside. He needs to be appreciated. He needs to be needed. And he needs to be looked at as a smart guy. That's like therapy to him, having these platforms and having people, who pretend to believe him to get more viewers on YouTube. He absorbs them listening to him. It soothes him. Finally, I'm worth listening to. He's talking about how awesome it would be when the truth comes out, right? Or what did he say? Awesome, or it would be... he wants to stick it to people who he knows are smarter than him, who make incorrect guesses, which of course is a part of the YouTube ether, that people make things up. These people are still a lot smarter than him, but he would love to be able to say, you are wrong right now. you think you're smarter than me, like most people are. But guess what? Now I am, because I know what happened and you didn't. So beat the shit out of Tony, right?
All damn day.
All damn day he wants to beat the shit out of Tony. All damn day. Dude, you're on a live, and the microphone is yours. Do that, or don't do that rather, in person. But now you have a chance to set the record straight, and he refuses to do that. And that's to be noted, and that is because he can't. He cannot prove to us that there was a scent that the dog followed, and that the scent was from Sebastian. How could the lack of a scent trail ever make him look guilty? Yeah, because he was there that night. The gift that keeps on giving. Too bad he's getting away with it, but not with us. The truth is the truth. No matter what actually... there's a difference between the legal truth and the reality of what actually happened. Right? You can be found not guilty, but it doesn't make you innocent. And your language will indicate anything but innocence. Doesn't matter what the courts decided or how police may have messed up a case, and so on. Make him look guilty. And guilty of what? Covering up what took place, in my opinion. Yep. Very good. Police also said search dogs had not been able to pick up a scent trail for Rogers. None of the scent dogs picked up a trace of Sebastian. Listen to that. Ken Widener added that search and rescue dogs had not been able to pick up a scent. Ain't that something? So attack Tony all you want. How about you go against these guys, Chris? No, he picks somebody whom he can discredit and then call him TikTok Tony. He's just another TikToker making things up, right? No inside information, no anything. Yep, when Chris Proudfoot is being dismissive, you know that you have reached an area that needs to be explored further. Don't let him dismiss it. With the information and... With the information that I've gotten from Sumner County and TBR, and the fact that the dogs aren't 100%, they're not picking up his scent. Well, yeah, they're 97, is that? 97%, but it also depends on the handler. Let's move on. There was a glimpse of hope Thursday.
Are guilty.
Keep him talking, I agree. But mind you, there's a reason Lauren posted this part. And we talked about embedded confessions. Katie and I are guilty.
Guilty.
Is that it? Yes, Lauren, I believe. Also, he will tell on himself more and more and more. That's what he has been doing. So even though the case has gone cold, and I believe that actually Craddock said there's no reason to suspect Rogers or the Proudfoots. Yeah, I mean, as statement analysts, we have to follow the language, and sometimes this, not only pay attention to what is being published as needed, not people's conclusions, not opinions, not rhetoric. I've said it about the RCMP many, many times in the case of Jack and Lily. They were being deceptive, in my opinion, simply because they didn't want us to know that behind the scenes they actually told Daniel, we know you killed the kids. Right? So please let me know if there's more about the case that I have not paid attention to yet. And I will see you next time.